The air on Trenchia 7 tasted like metal and ash. Major Adrian Trask Vega had grown accustomed to it over the past 36 hours, though his filtration mask still hummed with the strain of processing the toxic atmosphere. It was the second day of what military analysts predicted would be a 3-year conflict between the Human-Synthetic Alliance and the Satros Federation. The planet's surface, once a thriving mining colony, now resembled an apocalyptic wasteland of chemical forests, bombed-out settlements, and underground command centers. Trask checked his tactical display one last time before dawn broke over the eastern ridge. The faint, blue glow illuminated his weathered face. The scar across his left cheek, a reminder of previous missions that had nearly claimed his life. His orders were straightforward. Infiltrate Satros territory, gather real-time satellite imagery of their defensive positions, and return to Spartan Squadron within 24 hours. "Command to Ghost Team, confirm position," came the stern voice of Brigadier General Mara Shield Ortega through his partially damaged comms unit. "Ghost lead here," Trask responded, keeping his voice low. "We're at the edge of the chemical forest, preparing to move into Sector 7. Satellite uplink is ready for deployment." Lieutenant Jackson Ghost, Remy, appeared at his side. The younger officer's specialized reconnaissance gear blending seamlessly with the rust-colored terrain. "UAV is prepped and ready, sir. We'll have eyes above in 3 minutes." Trask nodded, surveying the bleak landscape ahead. The ruins of what was once a thriving industrial town lay scattered between their position and the Satros command bunkers. Acid rain had carved grotesque patterns into the abandoned structures, creating a maze of hazardous terrain. Beyond the town, chemical forests swayed unnaturally in the toxic breeze, their crystalline leaves refracting the dim morning light. "Remember," Trask told his team, "we're here for intelligence, not engagement. If we're spotted, we scatter and rendezvous at Point Echo. The mission data takes priority over everything else." The words had barely left his mouth when the first shot rang out. The distinctive whine of a Satros sniper rifle split the dawn silence. One of Trask's team members, Private Lowe, crumpled immediately, the armor around his chest smoking from the direct hit. "Contact! Northwest Ridge!" Remy shouted, diving for cover behind a twisted sheet of metal. Trask's combat instincts took over. "Return fire, suppressive only. Fall back to the ravine." The ambush had been perfectly executed. Satros forces must have tracked their approach despite the stealth protocols. As Trask provided covering fire for his retreating squad, a second shot shattered his comms unit, sending painful feedback screaming through his ear. The tactical display on his wrist flickered and died. "Remy, get the others out," Trask ordered, gesturing frantically toward the relative safety of the ravine behind them. "I'll hold them off." Remy hesitated, clearly torn between duty and loyalty. "Sir, protocol states." "Go! That's an order!" Trask fired 3 more rounds toward the ridge before a barrage of plasma fire forced him to change position. The lieutenant finally relented, leading the remainder of the squad toward the extraction point. Trask knew his decision violated standard operating procedure, but splitting up would give the team a better chance of completing the mission. He would find another way back. As enemy fire intensified, Trask rolled behind a collapsed wall, debris raining down around him. A stray plasma bolt grazed his tactical suit, searing through the outer layer and exposing the vulnerable inner lining to Trenchia 7's caustic atmosphere. Warning indicators flashed across his cracked display. Suit integrity compromised. Atmospheric contaminants detected. Communications offline. Trask didn't need the readouts to tell him he was in trouble. His training kicked in, and he began systematically assessing his situation. Primary objective: survive long enough to rendezvous with his team. Secondary objective: gather whatever intelligence he could along the way. The sound of approaching Satros troopers forced him deeper into enemy territory. With each step, he moved further from the extraction point and deeper into the no-man's land that separated Alliance and Federation forces. His tactical map was offline, his comms dead, and his suit slowly failing. By military standards, Major Adrian Vega was now officially missing in action. Back at Spartan Squadron headquarters, the mood was grim. 26 hours had passed since Trask's team had returned without their leader. Lieutenant Remy stood at attention before Brigadier General Ortega, his face a mask of professional composure that barely concealed his guilt. "You left him behind," Ortega stated, her voice devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. "Major Vega ordered us to withdraw." "Ma'am," Remy replied. "He provided covering fire while we extracted with the partial intelligence data. I wanted to stay, but nothing, Lieutenant." Ortega cut him off sharply. The mission parameters were clear. No man left behind, regardless of rank or circumstance. She turned to the holographic display showing the last known position of Major Vega. The red dot pulsed weakly among a sea of Federation-controlled territory. With each passing hour, the likelihood of his survival diminished exponentially. 48 hours, Ortega declared, her eyes never leaving the display. If he doesn't establish contact within 48 hours of separation, we officially list him as KIA and move forward with operational planning. Those are Alliance protocols. Remy's composure slipped momentarily. "General, with all due respect, Major Vega is the best infiltration specialist we have. If anyone can survive behind enemy lines, it's him." "I don't want your respect, Lieutenant. I want results," Ortega replied coldly. "Prep a search drone for launch at the edge of our territorial control. If Vega is alive, give him something to home in on. If not..." She let the sentence hang unfinished. Remy saluted sharply and left to carry out his orders, the weight of his commander's unspoken message settling heavily on his shoulders. If Trask didn't return, Remy would carry the burden of having left him behind for the rest of his career. As the clock continued to count down, no one at Spartan Squadron headquarters entertained the possibility that their missing officer might return with anything more than his life, if he returned at all. The first 6 hours behind enemy lines were the most dangerous for Trask. Satros patrols crisscrossed the area, searching methodically for the Alliance infiltrator who had escaped their ambush. Trask kept to the shadows of demolished buildings, using his training to move unseen through the hostile territory. His damaged tactical suit was his most immediate concern. The breach in the outer layer had grown, exposing more of the inner lining to Trenchia 7's corrosive atmosphere. Already, he could feel the sting of chemical particles against his skin where the suit's protection was failing. Without repairs, he would face severe chemical burns within days, if not hours. Shelter was his first priority. As dusk approached, bringing with it the planet's notorious acid rain, Trask located a partially collapsed basement in what had once been a residential district. The underground space provided temporary protection from both the elements and enemy patrols. Using the dim light of his emergency backup, Trask assessed his resources. His sidearm remained functional with 32 rounds remaining. His tactical knife was secure in its sheath. The emergency rations in his belt pouch would last 3 days if carefully rationed. His water recycler was operational, but at reduced efficiency due to the suit damage. Most importantly, his personal data recorder was intact. If he discovered anything of military value, he could document it. "Prioritize, adapt, overcome," Trask muttered to himself, reciting the mantra taught to all Alliance Special Forces operatives. The first step was to address his suit damage. Trenchia 7's urban ruins held plenty of materials for improvisation. Trask scavenged synthetic fabric from abandoned furniture and adhesive compounds from industrial containers. Using his knife, he fashioned a makeshift patch for the worst of the damage, sealing it with a combination of heat from his emergency light and the adhesive. It wasn't pretty, but it would slow the corrosive effects of the atmosphere. The acid rain began shortly after nightfall, A deadly patter against the rubble above. Droplets found their way through cracks in the ceiling, sizzling where they landed. Trask watched them eat into the concrete floor, grateful for his decision to seek underground shelter. Sleep came in short, vigilant intervals. Years of special operations training had conditioned Trask to rest while maintaining a level of awareness that would alert him to approaching danger. Each time he drifted off, his mind replayed the ambush, searching for clues he might have missed that could have prevented the separation from his team. Dawn brought new challenges and unexpected opportunities. As the acid rain subsided, Trask ventured from his shelter to scout the immediate area. In the early morning light, he discovered the wreckage of a Satros fighter that had crashed months earlier during the initial planetary bombardment. The craft had been picked clean of obvious valuable technology, but Trask's experienced eye spotted potential resources. The fighter's emergency systems, designed to withstand extreme conditions, included materials perfect for reinforcing his damaged suit. Over the next few hours, Trask salvaged polymer plates and environmental sealant, significantly improving his protection against the toxic atmosphere. More valuable still was a small power cell he extracted from the craft's auxiliary systems. Compatible with Alliance equipment and powerful enough to potentially boost a distress signal when he found a way to reach his team. With his immediate survival needs addressed, Trask turned his attention to his secondary objective, intelligence gathering. If he couldn't reach his team directly, he would make sure that when, not if, they found him, he would have something valuable to justify the risk of extraction. The Satros Federation had transformed Trenchia 7's landscape with their occupation. What had once been open plains were now crisscrossed with defensive structures, communication arrays, and supply depots. Their presence was most concentrated around the former mining facilities, suggesting they were extracting something valuable from the planet despite the ongoing conflict. Trask began systematic reconnaissance, documenting patrol patterns and defensive positions in his data recorder. He noted the regular movement of supply vehicles between outposts, calculating optimal times for future Alliance strikes. Most importantly, he discovered that the Satros forces were using an underground cable network to coordinate their defensive positions, a potential vulnerability if the Alliance could locate and sever the right connections. His careful observations nearly cost him his life on the second day. While tracking a Satros patrol from the cover of a chemical forest's edge, Trask failed to notice the approach of an automated security drone until it was almost upon him. The drone's sensors swept the area, its recognition algorithms processing the visual data for signs of intruders. Trask froze, pressing himself against the crystalline trunk of a mutated tree. The drone hovered 10 meters away, its scanning beam passing within centimeters of his position. Had his tactical suit been fully functional, its stealth features might have confused the drone's sensors. In its damaged state, however, he was relying purely on physical concealment. For 30 agonizing seconds, Trask remained motionless as the drone completed its scan. When it finally moved on to continue its patrol route, he released the breath he'd been holding. The encounter reinforced the danger of his situation and the need for more secure shelter during his reconnaissance activities. As dusk approached on the second day, Trask made a critical discovery. Following the underground cable network he'd identified earlier, he located what appeared to be an abandoned Satros communications outpost, likely decommissioned when newer facilities came online. The outpost was partially buried beneath rubble, making it easy to miss during standard patrols. Trask approached cautiously, checking for active security measures before attempting entry. The facility's main access was sealed, but a maintenance hatch on the roof had been damaged during previous bombardment, creating an entry point just large enough for him to squeeze through. Inside, the outpost was dark and silent. Emergency lighting provided minimal illumination, casting eerie shadows across abandoned workstations. Most of the equipment had been removed or disabled, but the structure itself provided excellent shelter from both Satros patrols and Trenchia 7's hostile environment. More importantly, Trask discovered that while the outpost had been disconnected from the main Satros network, its passive monitoring systems remained operational on emergency power. These systems weren't transmitting data, but were still receiving and recording it. A goldmine of intelligence if he could access the information. Trask set to work, drawing on his specialized training in enemy communication systems. The Satros technology was advanced, but followed logical patterns he had studied extensively during his preparation for this mission. Within hours, he had established a rudimentary interface with the monitoring equipment, allowing him to eavesdrop on nearby Satros communications. What he heard confirmed his earlier observations about the planet's strategic importance. The Satros were indeed extracting valuable minerals from Trenchia 7's crust, resources that could potentially shift the balance of power in the ongoing conflict. More immediately relevant, however, were the tactical communications detailing patrol schedules, defensive weaknesses, and supply routes. Trask worked methodically through the night, compiling a comprehensive map of Satros defensive positions based on the intercepted communications. Each detail was meticulously recorded in his data unit, building a strategic picture that would be invaluable to Alliance Command. If he could return with this intelligence, the sacrifice of his team's original mission would be more than justified. His concentration was so intense that he almost missed the sound, a faint scratching at the outpost's outer wall, distinct from the ambient noises of the deteriorating structure. Trask immediately killed the dim light he had been working by, drawing his sidearm as he moved silently toward the source of the disturbance. The scratching continued, more insistent now, accompanied by a low, chittering sound that raised the hairs on the back of Trask's neck. It wasn't mechanical, not a Satros drone or patrol. Something else had found his hiding place. Positioning himself beside the damaged wall panel where the sound originated, Trask readied his weapon. The panel buckled suddenly, metal groaning as something pushed against it from the outside. With a final screech of protesting metal, the panel gave way, and Trask found himself face to face with one of Trenchia 7's most notorious predators. The creature that burst through the opening was like nothing from Earth's evolutionary history. 6 limbs supported a body covered in translucent, crystalline scales that refracted the emergency lighting into prismatic patterns. Its head featured multiple sensory organs and a complex arrangement of mandibles that clicked together rapidly as it assessed the human before it. Trask recognized it immediately from his pre-mission briefings, a hound shard, one of the native predators that had adapted to Trenchia 7's toxic environment. The creatures were known for their exceptional hunting abilities, particularly their heightened sense of smell and limited camouflage capabilities in low light. The hound shard tensed, its primary limbs digging into the metal floor as it prepared to lunge. Trask knew his sidearm might not penetrate the creature's crystalline scales, at least not quickly enough to prevent it from reaching him. Instead of firing, he made a calculated decision. From his ration pack, Trask slowly extracted a protein cube, the movement deliberate and non-threatening. The hound shard's sensory organs twitched, clearly detecting the food source, keeping his eyes on the creature. Trask gently tossed the cube halfway between them. The predator's reaction was immediate, but not what Trask expected. Rather than pouncing on the food, it circled it cautiously, mandibles clicking in what seemed like assessment. After several tense moments, it finally consumed the offering, its complex mouthparts making quick work of the dense protein. "That's right," Trask murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not everything unfamiliar is a threat." The hound shard's head snapped up at the sound, but there was no aggressive movement. Instead, it seemed to study Trask with what he could only interpret as curiosity. Slowly, with the same deliberate movements, Trask offered another protein cube, this time holding it out in his palm. Minutes passed in a silent standoff before the creature finally approached. taking the food directly from his hand with surprising gentleness. Its mandibles brushed against his palm without breaking the skin, a remarkable show of control from a predator renowned for its ferocity. "Looks like we both know what it's like to be hungry in hostile territory," Trask said softly, daring to extend his hand to touch the creature's crystalline scales. The surface was smooth and cool, vibrating slightly under his fingertips as though the hound shard was purring. The encounter marked the beginning of an unlikely alliance. Over the next several hours, Trask continued his intelligence work while the hound shard remained in the outpost, seemingly content with the shelter and occasional food offerings. By morning, the creature had settled into a corner of the facility, its crystalline scales dimmed to blend with the shadows, a natural camouflage mechanism that Trask noted with professional appreciation. With the dawn of his third day behind enemy lines, Trask faced a critical decision. His intelligence gathering had yielded valuable results, but remaining at the abandoned outpost carried increasing risk of discovery. Satros patrols would eventually investigate the breach in the wall, and his supplies were dwindling rapidly. It was time to attempt to return to Alliance territory. Using the detailed map he had compiled, Trask plotted the safest route through Satros defenses. The journey would be perilous, requiring him to navigate through patrol zones, avoid automated security systems, and cross a chemical forest that had grown even more toxic since his arrival. His damaged tactical suit, despite his repairs, would provide limited protection against the environmental hazards. As Trask prepared to depart, the hound shard watched him with an intensity that suggested understanding. When he moved toward the exit, the creature followed, maintaining a distance that respected his space while clearly indicating its intention to accompany him. "Coming along, are you?" Trask asked, surprised by how quickly he had accepted the predator's presence as beneficial rather than threatening. "I suppose having a native guide couldn't hurt." The journey began, cautiously, with Trask and his unusual companion emerging from the outpost during a gap in patrol schedules. The hound shard proved immediately valuable, its sensitive olfactory organs detecting approaching Satros troops long before Trask's damaged equipment could alert him. With each warning, they would take cover, avoiding detection by margins that grew narrower with each encounter. The chemical forest presented a different challenge. Trenchia 7's mutated flora exuded toxins that could penetrate even intact protective gear over prolonged exposure. Trask's damaged suit offered minimal protection, forcing him to rely on the hound shard's guidance to navigate the least contaminated paths. The creature moved with confidence through the toxic undergrowth, occasionally doubling back to ensure Trask followed its precise route. Several times, it physically blocked him from stepping into areas where the concentration of toxins was highest, using its body as a barrier between the human and the deadliest aspects of the environment. By midday, they had covered significant ground, but Trask's condition was deteriorating. Despite his best efforts to protect himself, the cumulative exposure to Trenchia 7's atmosphere was taking its toll. His breathing had become labored, and a persistent burning sensation spread across the exposed portions of his skin. Rest became necessary, but safe locations were scarce. The hound shard led him to a depression in the forest floor, partially sheltered by the massive roots of crystalline trees. As Trask assessed the security of their temporary haven, the creature disappeared briefly into the undergrowth, returning with something clutched carefully between its mandibles. It dropped the object at Trask's feet, a small, tuberous growth with a pale blue interior exposed where the hound shard had broken it open. When Trask made no move to take it, the creature nudged it closer, making insistent clicking sounds with its mandibles. Trask hesitated, weighing the risk of consuming unknown alien flora against his deteriorating condition. His survival training included extensive information on xenobiology, but nothing specific about this particular plant. The hound shard's behavior, however, suggested it was offering something beneficial rather than harmful. "I hope you know what you're doing," Trask muttered, as he cautiously applied a small amount of the tuberous material to a chemical burn on his wrist. Almost immediately, the burning sensation diminished, replaced by a cooling numbness that spread through the injured tissue. Within minutes, the angry red inflammation had visibly reduced. Encouraged by this result, Trask applied the substance to his other injuries, experiencing the same soothing effect. The hound shard watched with what seemed like satisfaction before settling beside him, its crystalline scales shifting to better blend with their surroundings. "You're full of surprises," Trask told his companion, feeling strength returning as the pain of his injuries subsided. "I think you've earned a name. How about Shard? Simple, but it suits you." The newly named Shard responded with a soft clicking of its mandibles that Trask chose to interpret as approval. The brief rest had rejuvenated him, but time was still critical. According to his calculations, he had been missing for approximately 40 hours, approaching the 48-hour threshold, after which Alliance protocol would officially list him as killed in action. Their journey resumed with renewed urgency. The map Trask had created guided them toward a weakness in the Satros perimeter, a sector where patrols were less frequent due to atmospheric conditions that interfered with their security sensors. If they could breach this section, the path to Alliance territory would be relatively clear. As they approached the perimeter, however, Trask spotted an opportunity that outweighed the risk of his original plan. A damaged Satros weapons cache, likely an old reserve depot, lay partially exposed where bombardment had collapsed the surrounding structure. If he could salvage functional weapons from the cache, he would not only improve his chances of survival, but also deliver valuable intelligence on Satros armaments to Alliance command. The detour added danger to their journey, but Trask judged it worth the risk. With Shard keeping watch for patrols, he carefully approached the weapons cache, slipping through a narrow opening in the collapsed structure. Inside, most of the weapons had been damaged beyond repair by exposure to the elements, but one storage locker remained partially sealed. Trask forced it open to discover a Satros plasma rifle in remarkably good condition. The weapon was more advanced than anything the Alliance had encountered in previous engagements. A prototype, perhaps, or a specialized model reserved for elite units. Examining the rifle, Trask noted its unusual power core, a vibrant green cell that pulsed with energy despite its age. The weapon's design was complex, but followed logical patterns that his training helped him decipher. Within minutes, he had determined the basic operation, power flow, targeting systems, and firing mechanism. What made the discovery particularly valuable was the rifle's intact power management system. Unlike standard Satros weapons that required frequent recharging, this model appeared designed for extended operation in hostile environments. If Alliance engineers could reverse engineer this technology, it could provide a significant tactical advantage in the ongoing conflict. Trask secured the plasma rifle and scavenged additional power cells from partially damaged weapons in the cache. The extra weight would slow their progress, but the strategic value of the technology justified the burden. With Shard leading the way, they resumed their journey toward the perimeter, now armed with both intelligence and advanced weaponry. Their approach to the perimeter coincided with a toxic atmospheric event, a common occurrence on Trenchia 7 that the Satros had learned to predict and avoid. Caustic clouds descended from the upper atmosphere, reducing visibility and forcing Satros patrols to seek shelter in reinforced bunkers. While dangerous to Trask despite his protective gear, the event provided ideal cover for their crossing attempt. Shard seemed unaffected by the toxic clouds, its crystalline scales providing natural protection against the caustic elements. The creature guided Trask through areas where the concentration was lowest, occasionally using its body to shield him from particularly dense pockets of toxins. As they neared the final checkpoint, a monitoring station that controlled access to the sector, Trask spotted a critical weakness in the Satros defense network. CO2 exhaust vents from the station's environmental systems created a tunnel of relatively clean air through the toxic cloud cover. These vents, unguarded due to the atmospheric event, could provide safe passage beyond the perimeter. Their plan was simple: use the toxic cloud as cover to approach the exhaust vents. Then, follow the tunnel of clean air beyond the perimeter sensors. Once past the checkpoint, they would have a clear path to Alliance territory, where Trask hoped to find a patrol or reconnaissance unit that could facilitate extraction. As they moved into position, however, their luck finally ran out. A Satros elite reconnaissance team, equipped with specialized gear for operating in toxic conditions, emerged from the checkpoint bunker on what appeared to be a routine security sweep. Their path would intersect directly with Trask and Shard's position within minutes. There was no time to find an alternate route. The toxic cloud was already beginning to dissipate as atmospheric processors worked to clear the air, soon eliminating their primary cover. Trask had a split-second decision to make: attempt to evade the patrol and risk losing their best opportunity to cross the perimeter, or engage and create their own opportunity. The Satros plasma rifle felt heavy in his hands as he considered his options. Using it would reveal his position to any nearby Satros forces and potentially trigger a full-scale search. Not using it might mean capture or death if the patrol discovered them. Shard seemed to sense his dilemma, pressing closer to his side with a soft clicking of its mandibles. The creature's crystalline scales had shifted to their most reflective state, creating disorienting patterns in the dim light filtering through the toxic clouds. "Distraction and precision," Trask murmured, formulating a plan that utilized both their strengths. "Ready to cause some chaos, Shard?" The Hound Shard responded with an anticipatory tensing of its limbs, ready to follow Trask's lead. Their strategy took shape quickly. Shard would create a distraction at the far side of the checkpoint, drawing the attention of part of the patrol, while Trask used the plasma rifle to disable the checkpoint's communication array. Without the ability to call for reinforcements, the isolated patrol would be forced to investigate the distraction, creating an opening for them to slip through the exhaust vents. Trask positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the communications array, a distinctive antenna structure mounted on the checkpoint's roof. Shard moved silently through the toxic haze toward its target position, its crystalline scales making it nearly invisible in the swirling clouds. The moment arrived with the precision of a well-orchestrated operation. At Trask's signal, Shard erupted from cover at the far side of the checkpoint, its crystalline scales flashing brilliantly as it charged toward the perimeter fence. The effect was immediate. Half the patrol broke off to investigate the disturbance, weapons raised. In that same instant, Trask activated the Satros plasma rifle. The weapon hummed to life, its targeting system projecting a faint green reticle onto his field of vision. He aligned the reticle with the communications array and squeezed the trigger. The plasma bolt streaked through the toxic air, its energy cutting a visible path through the chemical haze. It struck the communications array with devastating accuracy, turning the sophisticated equipment into a shower of molten components. Secondary explosions rippled through the checkpoint's power systems, plunging sections of the perimeter into darkness. Chaos erupted exactly as Trask had anticipated. The remaining patrol members rushed to secure the checkpoint, their attention divided between the mysterious attacker and the unexpected systems failure. In the confusion, Shard disengaged from its distraction run and circled back toward Trask, moving with incredible speed despite the hazardous terrain. They converged at the exhaust vents as planned, slipping into the tunnel of clean air created by the environmental systems. The passage was narrow and hot, forcing Trask to crawl on hands and knees, while Shard easily navigated the confined space with its flexible limbs. Behind them, alarm klaxons began to sound as the Satros forces realized they were under attack. The exhaust tunnel extended beyond the perimeter sensors, eventually opening into a drainage culvert that had been partially reclaimed by Trenchia 7's aggressive flora. As they emerged from the confined space, Trask consulted his mental map of the territory. They had successfully breached the Satros perimeter and were now in the contested zone between Federation and Alliance control. Still dangerous, but significantly closer to extraction. Trask checked his chronometer. 46 hours since separation from his team. They had less than 2 hours before Alliance Command would officially classify him as killed in action and potentially abandon any remaining search efforts. Their pace increased to a desperate sprint across the contested territory, Shard easily keeping pace despite the challenging terrain. The final challenge came at the border of Alliance-controlled territory. A Satros rapid response team, alerted by the checkpoint attack, had deployed to intercept any potential infiltrators attempting to cross into Alliance space. From his vantage point on a ridge overlooking the border, Trask counted 8 heavily armed soldiers establishing a blockade along the most direct approach. "So close," Trask muttered, studying the deployment pattern for weaknesses. The Satros team had positioned themselves effectively, covering all obvious crossing points with overlapping fields of fire. A frontal approach would be suicide, even with the plasma rifle's superior firepower. Shard nudged his arm, drawing his attention to an alternative route. The Hound Shard indicated a depression in the terrain that led to a drainage channel, similar to the one they had used to escape the perimeter, but significantly more exposed to enemy fire. It wasn't ideal, but it offered their best chance of bypassing the blockade without direct confrontation. They began their approach, using the limited cover provided by rock formations and mutated vegetation. Trask's damaged tactical suit, patched multiple times during their journey, offered minimal stealth capabilities against the Satros sensors. Their progress was painfully slow, each meter gained representing another opportunity for detection. They had covered approximately half the distance to the drainage channel when disaster struck. A Satros soldier, positioned higher than his companions, spotted movement and called out an alert. Within seconds, the entire rapid response team had shifted their focus to Trask and Shard's position, weapons trained on the approaching figures. The first volley of plasma fire forced them to dive for cover behind a rocky outcropping. Return fire wasn't an option. The enemy positions were too well fortified, and Trask's salvaged plasma rifle, while powerful, had limited ammunition. Their only advantage was Shard's natural ability to blend with the environment and move with incredible speed. "We need to split their attention," Trask told his companion, formulating a desperate plan. "I'll provide covering fire from here while you circle around to flank them. When I signal, create as much chaos as you can on their right flank. I'll engage from the left, and we'll meet at the drainage channel." Shard's mandibles clicked in what Trask had come to recognize as acknowledgement. The creature tensed, preparing to spring into action at his signal. "Go!" Trask commanded, rising from cover to fire a series of plasma bolts at the Satros positions. The salvaged rifle performed admirably, its energy signature confusing the Satros soldiers who clearly recognized it as one of their own weapons. The momentary hesitation was all Shard needed to slip away, its crystalline scales shifting to near invisibility as it circled toward the right flank. Trask maintained suppressive fire, counting his remaining energy cells. 4 shots remained before the weapon would be depleted, not enough for a prolonged engagement, but potentially sufficient for their desperate gambit. He needed to make each shot count, while giving Shard time to reach position. The Satros forces began to advance, using coordinated movement to close the distance while maintaining covering fire. Their tactics were disciplined and effective, demonstrating the elite training that made them formidable opponents. Trask retreated strategically, drawing them toward his position and away from Shard's approach vector. When the Hound Shard reached position, Trask gave the signal. 3 rapid plasma bolts fired in quick succession at the Satros left flank. As the soldiers reacted to this threat, Shard erupted from concealment on their right, its crystalline scales flashing brilliantly in the dim light. The creature moved with terrifying speed, charging directly into the Satros formation. The effect was immediate and devastating. Two soldiers fell immediately to Shard's attack, their protective gear offering minimal resistance against the creature's natural weapons. The remaining forces scrambled to respond to the unexpected threat, their formation breaking down into individual defensive postures. In that moment of confusion, Trask made his move. With his final plasma bolt, he disabled the squad's communication officer, preventing them from calling for reinforcements. Then, abandoning the depleted weapon, he sprinted toward the drainage channel, trusting Shard to disengage and follow. The Hound Shard didn't disappoint. Having created sufficient chaos among the Satros forces, it broke away from the engagement, easily outpacing the soldiers as they attempted to regroup. Trask reached the drainage channel first, sliding into the protective cover of the concrete structure as plasma fire scorched the ground around him. Shard joined him seconds later, its crystalline scales pulsing with energy from the exertion. Together, they navigated the drainage system, putting vital distance between themselves and the Satros Rapid Response Team. The channel sloped downward, carrying them deeper into contested territory and closer to Alliance control. As they emerged from the drainage system, Trask consulted his chronometer. 47 hours and 30 minutes since separation. They had barely 15 minutes before Alliance Command would officially declare him killed in action. The border of Alliance territory lay less than a kilometer ahead, but crossing that final stretch would expose them to any remaining Satros forces in the area. Their salvation came in an unexpected form. In the distance, Trask spotted the distinctive silhouette of an Alliance reconnaissance drone, likely part of Lieutenant Remy's search efforts. The drone was following a standard search pattern just inside Alliance territory, its sensors sweeping the contested zone for signs of friendly forces. Using his emergency signal mirror, Trask reflected light toward the drone, creating a pattern that any Alliance operator would recognize as a distress signal. For agonizing minutes, there was no response, and Trask feared the drone had failed to detect his signal. Then, abruptly, the drone altered its flight path, turning directly toward their position. "They've spotted us," Trask told Shard, relief evident in his voice despite his exhaustion. "Help is coming." The drone circled their position twice before departing rapidly toward Alliance territory. Trask knew what would follow. A rescue team would be dispatched immediately, likely arriving within 20 minutes. All they needed to do was hold their position and avoid detection by any remaining Satros forces. Those final minutes of waiting were among the longest of Trask's career. Every sound in the contested zone seemed amplified. The distant rumble of artillery, the hiss of acid rain beginning to fall, the occasional crack of weapons fire as patrols engaged with unknown targets. Beside him, Shard remained vigilant, its sensory organs constantly scanning for approaching threats. When the Alliance rescue team finally arrived, they approached with appropriate caution. 4 soldiers in full tactical gear, weapons raised, emerged from cover approximately 50 meters from Trask's position. Leading them was Lieutenant Remy, his expression hidden behind his tactical mask, but his body language conveying a mixture of disbelief and relief. "Major Vega?" Remy called, his voice amplified by his suit's external speakers. "Identify yourself!" "Ghost Lead. Confirmation code Sierra 9 Delta," Trask responded, using the predetermined authentication sequence. "Request immediate extraction for myself and 1 companion." The rescue team advanced cautiously, their weapons trained on Shard, until Trask placed himself protectively between them and the creature. "It's with me," he explained, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We wouldn't have made it without each other." Remy's hesitation was brief, but noticeable before he signaled the team to stand down. "Understood, sir. Extraction vehicle is standing by just beyond the ridge. We need to move quickly. Satros reinforcements were detected moving into the area 10 minutes ago." The journey to the extraction point was mercifully uneventful. Trask's legs felt leaden with each step. The cumulative effects of 48 hours of survival behind enemy lines finally catching up with him. Without Shard's supporting presence at his side, he might not have made it the final distance. The extraction vehicle, a low-profile tactical transport designed for rapid deployment and retrieval, waited exactly where Remy had indicated. As they approached, the rear hatch opened to reveal a medical officer and additional security personnel. Their expressions of shock at the sight of Trask, accompanied by a native predator, were almost comical, despite the gravity of the situation. Major Vega requesting permission to board with native life form, Trask stated formally. Knowing that protocol required explicit authorization for bringing unknown organisms onto Alliance vessels. The medical officer exchanged glances with the security team before responding. General Ortega's standing orders were to retrieve you by any means necessary, sir. I believe that extends to your companion. As they boarded the transport, Trask felt the weight of the past 48 hours truly settle on his shoulders. His mission had evolved far beyond its original parameters, yielding intelligence, technology, and an unprecedented alliance with a native species that could change the course of the conflict on Trenchia 7. The transport lifted off smoothly, its stealth systems engaging as it rose above the contested territory. Through the viewport, Trask watched the toxic landscape recede, the chemical forests and ruined settlements blending into a patchwork of destruction that stretched to the horizon. Beside him, Shard observed the aerial perspective with apparent fascination, its crystalline scales reflecting the cabin lights in prismatic patterns. Lieutenant Remy approached cautiously, maintaining a respectful distance from the Hound Shard. Sir, General Ortega is expecting a full debriefing upon our return to headquarters. We didn't expect to find you alive, let alone with company and what appears to be Satros technology. Trask nodded, his expression grim but determined. The past 48 hours have been enlightening, Lieutenant. I've discovered vulnerabilities in the Satros defensive network that could provide significant tactical advantages, if exploited properly. He patted the data recorder secured to his belt. Everything's documented here. Patrol patterns, communication networks, supply routes. And this, he gestured to the deactivated plasma rifle, is unlike anything our engineers have examined before. Its power management system alone could revolutionize our field operations. Remy's gaze shifted to Shard. And your companion? How does it factor into all this? Shard, Trask corrected, resting a hand on the creature's crystalline carapace. Its species has adapted perfectly to Trenchia 7's environment. They can detect toxins, navigate chemical forests, and sense approaching enemies long before our technology can. If we could establish similar relationships with others of its kind, a native alliance, Remy concluded, the implications dawning on him. That would completely change our operational capabilities on this planet. The remainder of the journey passed in comfortable silence, with Trask using the time to organize his thoughts for the upcoming debriefing. The intelligence he had gathered would need to be presented systematically to maximize its strategic value. The plasma rifle would require careful handling to preserve its technological secrets for Alliance engineers. And Shard, his unexpected ally, would need advocates to ensure its proper treatment and potential role in future operations. When they finally arrived at Spartan Squadron headquarters, a reception committee awaited them on the landing pad. Brigadier General Ortega stood at the forefront, her stern expression betraying none of the relief that Lieutenant Remy had described. Behind her, a team of intelligence officers, medical personnel, and security specialists waited to process the unexpected returnees. As the transport's hatch opened, Trask stood tall despite his exhaustion and injuries. With Shard at his side and the salvaged plasma rifle secured over his shoulder, he stepped onto Alliance territory for the first time in 48 hours. The data recorder containing his meticulously compiled map of Satros defenses hung at his belt, physical proof of his mission's unexpected success. General Ortega approached, her gaze moving from Trask to Shard and back again. "Major Vega," she acknowledged formally. "It appears you've had an eventful 48 hours. Permission to introduce a new ally, General," Trask responded, gesturing to the Hound Shard. "This is Shard. It saved my life multiple times behind enemy lines and provided crucial assistance in gathering intelligence on Satros operations. I recommend immediate integration into our xenobiology program, with special attention to potential military applications." Ortega's expression remained neutral, but Trask detected a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Granted, Major. Our xenobiologist will be fascinated." She turned to address the waiting medical team. "Ensure that both Major Vega and his companion receive full medical evaluation. Priority 1 clearance for both." As the medical team approached, Trask handed the data recorder to Ortega. "Complete map of Satros defensive positions in Sector 7, ma'am, including patrol schedules, communication networks, and a previously unidentified vulnerability in their perimeter security. With your permission, I'd like to brief the tactical team personally once medical clearance is granted." Ortega accepted the recorder, her fingers closing around it with obvious appreciation for its value. 48 hours behind enemy lines, and you return with a map, a weapon, and a pet. Impressive work, Major. For the first time, a hint of a smile crossed her face. "Perhaps we should send more of our officers on unplanned excursions." "With respect, General, I wouldn't recommend it," Trask replied, the ghost of humor in his voice despite his exhaustion. "But I would recommend reassessing our understanding of Trenchia 7's native life forms. There's potential for cooperation we haven't explored." "Noted, Major. We'll discuss your recommendations in detail during debriefing." Ortega's gaze shifted to Shard, studying the creature with newfound interest. "In the meantime, get yourself and your new friend checked out by medical." "That's an order." As Trask was led toward the medical bay, with Shard following close behind, he heard Ortega addressing the intelligence officers. "I want a full analysis of that data within the hour. If Major Vega's information is accurate, we may have just gained the advantage we've been looking for in this sector." The medical evaluation was thorough, but efficient. Alliance doctors treated Trask's chemical burns and exposure symptoms, while xenobiologists cautiously examined Shard under Trask's watchful eye. The Hound Shard tolerated the examination with remarkable patience, seeming to understand that these procedures were necessary and non-threatening. "Fascinating adaptation to the toxic environment," the lead xenobiologist commented, carefully documenting the properties of Shard's crystalline scales. "The refractive properties alone could inspire new protective materials for our troops. And you say it can detect toxins before our sensors?" "And Satros patrols," Trask added, wincing slightly, as a medic treated a particularly severe chemical burn on his shoulder. "Its sensory capabilities exceed our most advanced detection systems, especially in Trenchia 7's atmospheric conditions." The xenobiologist made additional notes, clearly excited by the implications. "With your permission, Major, I'd like to conduct more comprehensive studies once you've both been cleared by medical—" "Nothing invasive," he added hastily, noting Trask's protective posture. "Just behavioral observations and non-invasive scans to better understand its capabilities." "Approved, provided I'm present for all procedures," Trask stipulated. "Shard isn't just a specimen. It's an ally that chose to help me when it could have just as easily considered me prey. That level of intelligence deserves respect." 4 hours after their return, Trask and Shard were finally cleared by medical and summoned to the command center for debriefing. The large, circular room was dominated by a holographic display currently showing a detailed map of Sector 7, compiled from Trask's data recorder and enhanced with additional Alliance intelligence. General Ortega stood at the center of the room, surrounded by tactical officers analyzing the newly acquired information. When Trask entered with Shard at his side, Conversations halted momentarily as attention shifted to the unusual pair. Major Vega, Ortega acknowledged, gesturing for him to join the central group. Your intelligence has already proven invaluable. We've identified 3 critical vulnerabilities in the Satros defensive network based on your observations. The holographic display zoomed in on specific sections of the map, highlighting the weaknesses Trask had documented during his time behind enemy lines. The underground cable network connecting Satros command centers was particularly emphasized, with Alliance analysts having already developed potential strategies for disrupting these crucial communications. The CO2 exhaust vents you utilized to cross their perimeter represent a significant blind spot in their security. One of the tactical officers explained, "We've identified similar installations at 6 other checkpoints. If we coordinate simultaneous infiltrations, we could potentially breach their inner defense ring at multiple points," Trask concluded, studying the holographic projections. Combined with targeted strikes against their communication network, we could create enough confusion to push the front line back several kilometers. The tactical discussion continued for hours, with Trask providing detailed context for each element of his intelligence. Shard remained by his side throughout, occasionally drawing curious glances from the assembled officers, but gradually being accepted as part of the unusual briefing. The salvage plasma rifle generated particular interest when Alliance engineers presented their preliminary findings. The power management system is unlike anything we've encountered in previous Satros weapons, the lead engineer reported. It's designed to maintain optimal efficiency, even in Trenchia 7's corrosive atmosphere, with power cells that can potentially last 10 times longer than our current technology. "Can we replicate it?" Ortega asked, focusing on the practical implications. "Given time and resources, yes," the engineer confirmed. More importantly, understanding this technology reveals a vulnerability in Satros equipment. Their reliance on these specialized power cells creates a potential point of failure if we can disrupt their supply chain. As the debriefing approached its conclusion, Ortega turned to Trask with a final question. "Your recommendations moving forward, Major? You've spent more time behind enemy lines than any other Alliance officer on Trenchia 7. What's your assessment of our strategic options?" Trask considered his response carefully, aware that his perspective had been fundamentally altered by his experiences over the past 48 hours. The Satros Federation believes they understand this planet, General, but they're approaching it purely as a resource to be exploited. They've failed to recognize the potential of native life forms like Shard species, potential allies that have already adapted to survive in conditions that challenge even our most advanced technology. He rested a hand on Shard's crystalline carapace, the gesture now natural and comfortable. "I recommend establishing a specialized unit dedicated to working with Trenchia 7's native predators. If we can build relationships similar to what I've developed with Shard, we could create reconnaissance teams capable of operating behind enemy lines for extended periods without the limitations of our current equipment." Ortega's expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed interest in the proposal. "A human-hound Shard alliance," she mused, studying the creature with new appreciation. "Unconventional, but potentially effective. I'll take your recommendation under advisement, Major." With the debriefing concluded, Trask was dismissed with orders to rest and prepare for potential future operations. As he and Shard left the command center, Lieutenant Remy intercepted them in the corridor. "Sir," Remy began, his expression a mixture of respect and lingering guilt. "I wanted to apologize again for leaving you behind. Protocol or not, I should have found a way to—" "You followed orders, Lieutenant," Trask interrupted firmly. "And in doing so, you ensured that at least part of our mission was completed successfully. The rest," he glanced at Shard, "worked out better than either of us could have anticipated." Remy nodded, accepting the absolution with visible relief. The xenobiology team has prepared quarters for both of you. They've modified one of the observation rooms to accommodate Shard's environmental needs, while maintaining proximity to your assigned quarters. I can show you there now if you'd like. Lead the way, Trask agreed, fatigue finally beginning to overtake the adrenaline that had sustained him through the debriefing. The modified quarters proved more comfortable than Trask had expected. His own space featured standard Alliance accommodations, while the connected observation room had been transformed into a habitat that mimicked Trenchia 7's less toxic regions. Crystalline formations, similar to those in the chemical forests, provided familiar terrain for Shard, while specialized environmental controls maintained atmospheric conditions suitable for the creature's physiology. The xenobiologists consulted our databases on hound shard behavior, Remy explained as they inspected the habitat. They've included nutritional supplements based on their native diet and installed sensory enrichment features to prevent stress during confinement. Trask watched as Shard explored the habitat, its movements suggesting cautious approval of the arrangement. They've done well, he acknowledged, though I suspect Shard would prefer the freedom to come and go between our spaces. That can be arranged, Remy assured him. The connecting door can remain unlocked if you're comfortable with that arrangement. The xenobiology team actually recommended it. They believe maintaining your bond will be crucial for future studies. After Remy departed, Trask finally allowed himself to truly relax for the first time in 48 hours. He shed his damaged tactical suit, now a patchwork of emergency repairs and environmental damage, and showered away the accumulated grime of Trenchia 7's hostile environment. Clean Alliance fatigues felt like luxury against his treated skin. As predicted, Shard showed little interest in remaining confined to its designated habitat. Once Trask had settled in his quarters, the creature joined him, choosing a spot near the viewport where it could observe the activity outside, while remaining close to its human companion. Trask found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had shared, from predator and potential prey to allies who had saved each other multiple times during their escape from enemy territory. The alliance they had formed represented something unprecedented in the conflict between the Human-Synthetic Alliance and the Satros Federation, a third perspective that transcended the artificial boundaries of their interplanetary war. "We changed things out there," Trask told Shard quietly, watching as the creature's crystalline scales shifted in response to his voice. "Not just the tactical situation, though that's significant enough. We've opened up possibilities that neither side had considered." Shard's mandibles clicked softly in what Trask had come to interpret as agreement. The creature's multiple sensory organs focused on him with an intensity that suggested understanding beyond mere animal comprehension. A soft chime announced the arrival of a message on Trask's terminal. General Ortega had approved his recommendation for a specialized unit working with Trenchia 7's native predators, with Trask and Shard designated as the program's initial test case. Effective immediately, they would begin working with the xenobiology team to develop training protocols and communication methods that could potentially be expanded to other human-hound Shard pairs. The second part of the message was more personal, a commendation for extraordinary service under extreme conditions, with a formal recognition of Trask's contributions to Alliance intelligence on Satros operations. There was no mention of a medal or public ceremony, just acknowledgement of a job well done under impossible circumstances. It was enough. Trask closed the message and turned back to the viewport, where Trenchia 7's quartered moon was rising over the horizon. Its pale light illuminated the landscape, transforming the toxic terrain into a hauntingly beautiful vista of crystalline formations and shadowed valleys. Beside him, Shard watched the same view, its crystalline scales reflecting the moonlight in prismatic patterns across the room. Together, they had survived 48 hours that should have been fatal by any reasonable assessment. They had returned with a map that could change the course of the conflict, a weapon that revealed crucial technological vulnerabilities, and a partnership that challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies cooperation. Most importantly, they had returned with the knowledge that victory in this war, and perhaps in all wars, wasn't measured solely by maps conquered or weapons acquired, but by the courage to trust, the ability to adapt, and the willingness to see allies in unexpected places. As Trenchia 7's quartered moon climbed higher in the night sky, Major Adrian Trask Vega and his unlikely companion settled into a companionable silence, their shared experiences forging a bond that transcended the boundaries of species and conflict. They had been tested in ways neither could have anticipated and had emerged stronger for it, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the ongoing struggle for Trenchia 7 and beyond. The human who had been missing for 48 hours behind enemy lines had indeed returned with a map, a gun, and a pet. But he had also returned with something far more valuable, a new perspective on what it meant to be truly allied in a hostile universe.